Now today we're going to combat something that every woodworker has at every stage during their career, I've got no doubt, and that is clutter. Everything needs its place, and the only way of doing that, in my opinion, in this small workshop is to put it up on the walls. It's not all about display. I've got to admit, this is 50-50, it's display and practicality, but there comes a time when you're tidying or you need to find something. If everything has a place, it's so quick and easy to get to it, to put it away, and it makes your workspace a lot easier to tidy and a lot better place to be, basically. So if everything has its place, then it's easy to find it, it's easy to put it away, to tidy, and for that reason I'm going to turn this wall here, these two, into the French cleat walls that you'll see on a lot of woodworkers' pages, a lot of woodworkers' videos. So to get this job started, the first thing we need to do is just rip down some wood for the French cleats.
Like every time I do repeatable cuts with a circular saw, I do find that it's easy to get one of these adjustable squares and just set it to the depth that you're going to place your guide rail, and then you're going to get the same depth of cut every time. I then just quickly got my circular saw on the 45 and then ripped off the first of the French cleats, which would leave a 45-degree cut left on the board itself. So once I'd done the first cut, it was very easy to get another adjustable square to give me the depth for the second one, and then I could rip that off using the circular saw just set on a normal 90-degree angle. And then it was just as simple as repeat the process until I got enough slats that I thought would cover the entirety of the cleat wall and leave me enough to put on the back of the things that I want to mount, and then gave them a quick sand and we were back into the shed for the next step. For anybody new to French cleating, it's really simple. The batten goes on the wall, the other side of the 45 goes on the piece that you're mounting, and then they lock together using the angles so you can't pull it away from the wall. So let's get the wall cleared and then we can get some of the pieces attached so we can start the fun bit, which is making the tool holders to go on the wall. Now, from everything I've seen, there's no set dimensions of where you would put your cleats, so it's really up to you how many you want to fit on there and how far apart they want to go. When you're making the pieces to go on them, then you have to take into account the depths. But I just marked off 4, I just spaced them evenly along where I wanted them on the wall, and then I marked on each of the battens where I was going to drill the holes so that they met the strongest parts of the wall. I put a few extra holes on there, a few extra screws just to make sure they didn't come away. And then with a countersink bit, it was just a case of roughly drilling those holes and then I could get them screwed up onto the wall. With the handy marks I made earlier with the spirit level, it's really easy to just pop all 4 of the cleats up on the wall, driving the longer screws into the studs as they were, and then the shorter screws into the plywood itself. If you've got any areas where the plywood's got a slight bow in it, then just pop an extra screw in to keep it close as you can to the wall. So with all 4 of those up, then we could start the fun job, which was actually to make the tool holders to go on the French cleat wall itself.
Okay, looking around, I have a feeling that this is going to get a lot messier before it gets tidier. I've got the cleats on, I've put the trim back in. I'm conscious this will get in the way of anything trying to go on the cleats here, but I've got plenty of hanging space. Now this leaves the wall on the side next to the window quite thin, but what I'm thinking is all of these squares and marking gauges, the adjustable squares, the small square and the speed square, he says slowly. And then I've got this adjustable bevel as well that I want to, a slide bevel that I want to put on there as well. I think all of these will fit nicely on here, bracketed by the big square. So I'm going to try and make some brackets that will hold them onto there, and then we'll decide what's left out of this mess of tools that we've taken off the wall to put onto the French cleats that are going to be closer to hand. Let's get cracking.
Now for the tool holsters themselves, I wasn't too concerned about aesthetics, so I just stripped down some 5mm plywood into long thin strips to make each of the holders out of, just taking the rough edges off with a little bit of sandpaper. And then once I had a lot of strips cut, I just started making a holster grip for each of the squares to sit in. with one of the wider piece on the outside and a thinner piece on the inside. Every piece that I glued together, I just used dabs of super glue and a bit of accelerator to keep the process moving, and before you know it, I was ready to add the magnets that I'd found on Amazon. Magnets come in a little stack. Each of these is about 4 or 5 mil in diameter, and then I just pop them across the bottom of the smaller piece so that once it's against the wall it will hold the square in place. In the end I did countersink the magnets as well, just to keep them from protruding too far from the surface of the plywood. Again, just stuck them in place with a little bit of super glue, sprayed some accelerator on it so I could get on with the job at hand. And then we were ready to mount the first of the squares onto the wall. This is the easiest one because it's not got the larger handle that the adjustable squares have. So I just countersunk and drilled the bracket straight onto the wall, and the square sat perfectly on it. And now I'm just going to whiz through showing you the other brackets. Now for the other ones, because they are slightly deeper on the handle of the adjustable squares, you'll notice that I put an extra piece of plywood just to keep it away from the wall so they sat straight, and I put a tiny magnet in by the handle as well just to hold them in place. You can make these however you want. They are easy and effective, and it's all about just as many magnets as you need to hold them in place. Once those are put together, I just did the same as before, just drilled straight through into the plywood. They're not really holding a huge amount of weight, so the thin plywood is enough behind them. And then I mounted the squares into them just to make sure that I had enough room to take them out again once I needed them. And then I just whizzed down that wall and I made the same holsters for my speed square and the sliding bevel and the smaller square that I've got as well. You don't need to see all of those. However you make these to suit your needs, you can have the squares the other way around. It's more about the space that you're putting them on, making sure that you're not filling it up in an efficient manner. And then once they're there, they're safe and they're easy to get and find whenever you need them. Now with that smaller wall filled up, it's time for the fun stuff. It's time to get over to the main French cleat wall and put up some of the larger tools.
Okay, so what we've got here is the first tools that I want to put up on the tool wall. So I've got my French cleat. I haven't cut it to size yet, but that's going to be what attaches them to the back. Then I've just got a piece of 12mm ply that I'm going to fix them to.
My idea here is just to make this as simple as possible. So I'm going to pop some dowels in to hold up the two double-sided flush cut saws. And then for the other one, I'm going to have to make a holster of some sort because it sits a little bit more proud from the surface. So I'll get these two mounted up first, mark where I need to pop the dowels, and then we'll work on the other saw in a second. I gave the dowels a very slight angle so that they held the saws in nicely. Quick test showed that that was going to work, so I moved on quickly to cutting some blocks to make the holster for the other saw. They were just glued down very easily with some super glue, and then I drilled from the back and screwed them into place just to make sure they were on there nice and tight. I gave the holster a couple of tests, as you can see here, and it held the saw well, but with a bit of a twist it seemed that it might fall out. So I've just popped a dowel in just in the top corner, as you can see here. It's loosely fitted, but it will hold everything in place and I can move it out of the way if it's needed. And with that in place, the saw is very well attached and easy to get at, but won't fall off either. So from there, I just cut a French cleat so I can attach it to the wall, countersunk it, screwed it to the back, and that was the first of our larger tool holders ready to go on the French cleats.
So in my opinion, the main reason to have the French cleat system on your wall is for flexibility. So you can pop all of these different brackets up for all of your tools up onto the French cleat. It holds them in place, as long as you're not too rough with it, because obviously it can still pop off upwards. But it'll hold them all in place, and then you can take your tools in and out, and if they don't work where they are, move it on to a different cleat. I'm going to work through all my tools like this, and I'm going to get everything I can put up onto this wall. So let's move on with the next ones. Find another tool that we can get up on the wall.
Yeah, for the remainder of the build, I decided in the editing process that actually it's quite self-explanatory what's happening. You just mount things onto the plywood backing, and then you pop in your French cleats. Here we've got some magnet strips. I use quite a few of these on the wall. The smaller ones are great because I can just put them in the hard to reach places up in the top corners to hold my drill bits and other smaller accessories, and then the bigger ones you'll see I can put the larger tools on, like chisels and files. But what I'm going to do now for the remaining build is I'm going to play some music for you guys, and I'm just going to speed through the builds. They're all pretty self-explanatory. If you want any more in detail, pop it in the comments. Pop me a like on the video as well if you're enjoying it, and a subscribe. But pop in the comments if you want any more details, if you've got any questions about some of the things that we're making here. I think they're all fairly self-explanatory, and they're all incredibly useful. The long strip of wood that I've just added there actually is great for stability. If you have items that you think are going to fall off the wall quite easily and need a little bit more stability on the French cleat, pop a little piece of wood down like this and a little block on the back of it so that everything is flush, and it will stop all of the tipping. I put all the marking gauges in, and this is not one I use a lot at the moment, but in the future I'm sure it's going to come in very handy. Next up we've got the Forstner bits. This one's I made very similar to the cutting gauges and the marking gauges one that you've just seen. The only thing I will note is with these they get quite heavy, so it's well worth putting that extra long piece on the bottom just to stop the rocking to pull them off the French cleat wall. As you can see, the larger Forstner bits were very easy, just a hole and they sit on the, held in place by their head. Now with these ones, the little ones, they're slightly difficult because they've got to go through the hole, but there's nothing then that will hold them in place. So I decided to just countersink them into the front using a countersink bit and then cut away a little bit so I can just slide them in and out basically. And in the end they sat quite nicely. With the Forstner bits housed, we can now move on to the spoke shaves. I've just drawn 3 pairs of diagonal lines on these 2 blocks of wood, where I'm going to cut about halfway along them with the jigsaw so that I can then slide the spoke shaves into place and hopefully it'll hold them very nicely together. You'll see more what I mean when I get the jigsaw out and start going at it. With the cuts made and the spoke shaves lined up, you can kind of see what I'm trying to achieve here. I'm just trying to get the angles right, and then the block at the back that I put on the bottom and the French cleat on the top will hold everything into position.
So where we've come to now, I've shown you this side where all my marking gauges are. I showed you making the 3 holsters up here. Those small magnets that I used are fantastic. They actually came a bit smaller than I expected, but they've been brilliant. They hold the tools on there really nicely. I did put the ones on the end to hold them in place. I made an extra one for my speed square that I didn't show. It's all the same technique, and I've got my little square on there and the sliding bevel. What I'm really excited about though is to show you where we've gone with the rest of this behind me, because I showed you making a few of the pieces, but I've added to it. So I've tried to make this look as best as I can, similar to what the rest of the video has been like. Truth be told, I've made this video over the course of a few weeks. I've broken up other projects that I've had by doing it, so I'm constantly pushing the workshop forwards so that I'm not only making videos, but I'm also making stuff that benefits the space around me. What you've seen, this has always been on the wall. I've moved it across. Obviously the saws are in their same place that they were before. This is one of the little magnets that we had before with the drill bits on it. I've matched it on this side. I've put another one up there, you might see it because of the light. It's a great way of using the small space that I've got. Then, what the other ones that we saw the marking gauges. They go up on the wall. We also saw the spoke shaves, so let's not dwell on those. They go up there. I'm probably going to forget where everything went. And we saw the Forstner bits, so they live up there. On top of that, I took all of my files and I attached them nearly drop it, I attached them to a giant magnet strip and then backed that onto a piece of plywood. So now I've got all of those just on the wall, nicely pegged up there. I did the same for my chisels. So it's all in one place. I can just take them off the wall and pop them back on without any effort and without damaging any of the sharp bits of the chisels. So it's worked perfectly. Now, there are a couple of extra things that I've done that I've made entire videos for because they're a little bit more either complicated or interesting, depending on which way you look at it. First one is the card scraper holder with a hole for the burnisher. This is because I kept losing my card scrapers. So that to me is one of the most exciting and useful things that I've put together. The next one of the biggest things on the wall, also again vital for me because I'm quite messy, is the sandpaper holder. As you can see, I've put nice trim on the fronts of all of these as well, so I think it makes for quite a nice backdrop. And then this, we're not going to dwell on too much, but this is actually probably my favourite build so far because it is something I didn't expect I could do, and that is a sign to show who we are, and I love that. So there is more. As you noticed, I extended the cleats this way. I also went underneath. We've got our lovely drawers that we made in the last video. I've also put the French cleat system underneath, and these are for things that I use less often. So anything that I can just hang up, like the spirit level, all I've done is put a French cleat with a little dowel on it, like that. That sits on the French cleat, like so, and then the spirit level sits on it. I'm not worried about it falling off, and it's a really clever way of storing things flush to the wall. I've done the same for my saw, and then I thought, well, why stop at that? I upgraded my system for pocket holes a few weeks ago, so I just made a little shelf for it. Keeps it off the floor. Anything you can keep off the floor is going to benefit you when you come into cleaning up at the end of the day. So it's just a shelf. It's made in the same way as all the others. Supportive triangles, the French cleat system again, and then the stabilizers at the bottom. It just sits again. It sits on a French cleat. I can show you it up here. It sits on a French cleat, really solid. And if I wanted to display my Craig system, I could do so. So again, this is the versatility. You can move all these things around. You find you're not using them, move them to one side, move them higher, move them lower. You know, if you're not using your card scrapers this week, they can go up there, out the way, and you can pick them and move them around as and when. I've got loads more stuff that I want to do to this wall. I've got spaces that I want to fill, and I've also got everything below and to the side. I'm going to keep going, but that's got to be the end of this video because otherwise it's going to be hours long, and you guys are going to have switched off long before. So, thank you for coming with me along this journey to get to where we are now. If you've enjoyed it, please click the like button and comment. Loads of comments. Tell me what else we should be putting on the wall and show me your French cleat walls. There's so many people out there who've gone down this route and it's fantastic. If you can subscribe, the more subscribers I get, the more chance I've got to make more videos, and that makes me so happy. And then I can just keep going along this journey that I'm thoroughly enjoying so far. There's loads more videos that have coming up, and there's loads that I've already got out there. You'll see some links pop up on the screen to go on if you want to carry on watching. One of them I'll make sure will be to making something else for this French cleat wall, whether it's the sign or whether it's the sandpaper rack. Thank you so much, and until next time, I'm Mark. Start making.